This is Sarah, and today I intend to go over some of the thought experiments about consciousness that have haunted me my entire life. And I will visit each one of these today from the perspective of materialism. And by materialism, I mean the belief that all things in the universe are matter, or the result of a process that takes place within a material system. This includes consciousness. Without realizing it, this is the worldview that I adopted because I got the sense this was an established truth. And if you have thoughts about them after I'm done saying all of this, talk to me about it. Continuity of consciousness. So thought experiment number 1 has to do with the dirty little secret of transporters. And by transporters, I mean the technology that you see pretty frequently in Star Trek. In this science fictional universe, humans can teleport themselves to locations that are very far away by basically making an exact copy of their physiology in the computer, deconstructing themselves, and by deconstructing that really just means destroying themselves, but then recompiling molecule by molecule their entire body as it was in a different location. It seems plausible. I mean, if we are just matter, then there's no reason why we couldn't copy and paste all of the matter stuff from one location to another. The thing that bugs me about this is that if you are the version of yourself stepping onto the transporter pad, at the point in time when you are dematerialized, you're technically being destroyed. You die. It's not like that same you gets sucked through a tube and is suddenly in a different location. You would technically cease to exist, and then something very similar to you would spring into existence someplace else. But that other human, that other entity, would be something separate entirely. This little tidbit kind of ruined Star Trek for me for a long time. Because anytime I saw someone use a teleporter, I was like, this is exactly how that would work. Because imagine a scenario where there's a transporter malfunction, and you're standing on the transporter pad and your physiology is copied into the computer, but for some reason you aren't deconstructed. However, in the location where you're supposed to rematerialize, that process does take place. So there's this overlap. There's this brief period of time where you haven't been dematerialized in the point of origin, but there's now a copy of you where you're meant to be. So for this, period of time, there are 2 of you. And both are absolutely convinced that they are the original, when in fact they would each be unique and separate. Which brings me to thought experiment number 2. Duplication of consciousness. There are suddenly 2 identical copies of you. Say, another you standing right next to you right now, with all the same cells, all the same neurons, all the same memories, all the same life experiences. Since consciousness in these thought experiments is attributed to the brain, and that brain, which is in that identical copy, is separate from yours, even though they're exactly like you, they're technically a separate new person altogether. They have ownership over all of that now because it is all privately theirs within their separate brain. I don't like it, but that's how it would be. And then you could copy and paste me 1,000 times and there'd be 1,000 me's, but they wouldn't be me. They would be separate. They'd just have all of my dear life experiences as their own. And from that point of origin onwards, we'd all be separate, different people with slightly different life experiences. So that leads me to thought experiment number 3, translocation of consciousness. So the only reason why we feel like we die is because our bodies grow old, or we get sick, and something happens to the meat hard drive, or the thing that supports the meat hard drive, like this. If we could create a synthetic body, like a cyborg, cybernetic shell that we could, transplant the consciousness bit into, Would that be possible in the future? And if that's the case, what is the consciousness bit? What is the you that would need to be copied over to that new body? I always kind of argued that no, this wouldn't be possible, because I do think that there is some important factor to the parts of us that source information from the external world, our sensory organs. I don't know if that would save everything, every bit of you that feels like you. Something would be lost. My friend Scotland and I had a discussion about this one night during the pandemic, and she had a perspective on this that actually talked me out of my stance, and I thank her for that, because it's the only one of these thought experiments that has a solution that I'm actually kind of content with. She said that she thinks it would be possible one day to dump the meat body, because if we did it slowly, like, one cell at a time, for example, we wouldn't notice it, because we'd be able to acclimate as we went. And in a sense, this already happens. They say that every 7 years, every one of the cells in our body dies and is regenerated. So every 7 years, you technically are entirely new, biologically at least. But we don't notice it because, again, this happens a little bit at a time over a long period of time. Since that is technically already happening, like we don't even think about it, then it is possible, I think, that if we replaced each cell in our bodies, a small amount of them at a time, we could acclimate and then eventually wake up one day and be completely replaced with something synthetic and new, and we wouldn't know the difference. So the fourth one, location of consciousness. I kind of hint at it. What do you attribute consciousness to exactly? If it is just an epiphenomenon of the brain, like something that emerges from the brain, like once brains evolve to be sufficiently complex, then are you just a brain? And if not, like if there is something more to it, then where do you draw the boundary? What can you not subtract from this before you stop being you? And the fifth thought experiment is transcribing consciousness. But you see this also in science fiction a lot. You see people downloading their selves into like a flash drive and then sticking that flash drive into another body, and then they're just that body now and they're good to go, but them, who they are, remains the same. So that is to say, okay, well, we are just thoughts and experiences and memories. That is who we are, our sense of self. And that is the thing that can kind of be plugged into other forms. And the forms are just like things we pilot to experience the physical world. Once I get to this point in the thought experiments, something begins to get teased out. And that's really that consciousness, or the element of consciousness, is separate from what we identify as ourselves. In this thought experiment, the you, or the thing that feels like your identity, is attributed to memories, thoughts, experiences, the stuff that you accumulate within your brain throughout the course of your life. That is your essence. So you could say that that is the information that equates to your sense of self, your individuality. Your brain then serves a different function. Like, it contains all of that information, but as a piece of hardware, the brain is kind of a vessel that produces the service of awareness or consciousness. And that seems to be the relationship between the two in this example. The brain is this conduit that generates conscious awareness, and if you sprinkle your flavoring on top of that mechanism, then it's you. Again, sounds plausible in the future if experience, if memory can be transcribed into data, the same way that computers use memory to store programs and files and images, how would they be transcribed? Could we just be reduced to a code, like math, zeros and ones? Could you code exactly what I'm feeling right now? Could you? How would you know? And then if any of that is possible, what are we really then? The thing that I don't like about what is implied by all of these is that consciousness and your sense of being or self are two separate things. Consciousness ends up just being a function that's performed by biology, a physical system, which, yes, in materialism, that is in essence all consciousness amounts to. But you are the information that is generated by that system while it's in use. There's a separation between the two. And I think that inherently as a child and a growing adult and into my adulthood, there's some part of me that has always felt that that isn't the case. And I didn't really know how to communicate that until recently. This brings me to my robotic offspring. Noodle Feet turned 10 this week. And I want to say that my work on Noodle, like my studies in robotics and electronics and artificial intelligence, it's the thing that led me to where I am now. All of that helped me comprehend the relation between technology and biology, like how humans work, where there could potentially be similarities and crossover, but there's, in my mind, as I see it, a clear boundary where things start to get pretty murky. And this is right around the area where you start talking about awareness and consciousness and what that actually is. And I don't think that I would have seen that as clearly had I not been trying to create consciousness, the conscious experience, for my robotic offspring themselves. So happy birthday, Noodle Feet. 10 is a big number. At this point, I am going to diverge from my introduction of materialism and start paving the road to New Frontier. And if you have any of your own thought experiments about death, consciousness, experience of being an individual, would love to hear it. I would love to hear them. I think that's why we're here. Until my next video, keep making awesome stuff out there, and thank you for watching. Sophie is being the best kitty in the entire world.